Hello crafty friends, it's Donna here. I have for you today a floral card with some really rich colours and also the very difficult process of choosing a background once you have an image that pops this much. The stamp that we're highlighting today is called Sketchy Hibiscus from Paper Rose Studio, and I'm going to stamp that with Memento Tuxedo Black ink. This ink is alcohol marker friendly, and so when I colour it with my Copics, I'm going to have no trouble with the ink running. You can see on the left a couple of really nice background dies that I thought were going to be my plan for this card, but later on in the video you'll see why they were a really bad idea. I've used this stamp before. I'll put a link up the top to another card where I've coloured this in more traditional hibiscus colours. Because I've used the stamp before, I got a really good image with just one inking. I did have to go back and repress into a couple of areas, but that was all it needed. I have chosen some dark, medium and light colours, but you'll see that my light is really very much in the mid-tone range. I'll pop the numbers of the colours that I used onto the screen. As always, I'm going to edit this video so that you can watch the colouring of one petal with a slightly different shape, one bud and one leaf, and a little look at how I did the stamens. Once you've done something once, it's just a matter of repeating it using the same principles. This stamp has a lot of beautiful lines on it, and I'm using those to guide where I put my darker colours. I'm putting the darkest of the reds, which is deep burgundy, into the centre of the flower, and then stretching that up a little bit along the lines. Then as I work the next colours, I'm working out along those lines, then shading in a little from the edge, again using the lines to stretch the colour in, and then finally filling in the centre with my lightest colour. Lighter colours can tend to bleach out some of the deeper, richer colours, so I'm going to go back in again with my darkest colour and re-add the shadows. That is, the line along the edge of the petal where I can see it's sitting underneath the petal next door. For the buds, I'm choosing just the darkest of the colours so that they'll stand out as being different to the flowers. The difference isn't huge, but I can see it. Sometimes, like in the case of this flower, where the petals are all up and over each other, I find it helpful to mark out the shadows first, and then go back and fill in each petal. When it came to colouring the leaves, I decided I'd like some greys, but when I looked for my cool greys, I realised that I'd left them in Australia, and so I went with some BVs, which are incredibly cool greys because they're kind of on the blue side, but I really like the final effect. To colour each leaf, I used my darkest colour and went up the centre stem, and then on each of those little segments, I coloured just above the line that's marked on the image. Then, using successively lighter markers, I went in and blended those colours outwards and upwards towards the tip a little bit each time. If I ran out of space before I got to the final colour, I didn't let that worry me. All of the leaves were coloured the same way, except if a leaf was sitting under a flower, I also added a shadow right alongside the edge of the petal. Finally, the stamens. When I stamped the image, these came up black, and also my colouring did encroach a little bit even into the white spaces. And so I'm using my white gel pen to reclaim that space that I coloured over, and also to put a white dot in the centre of each of those little black dots where the pollen's going to be. And then I'm going in with bright yellow, Y35 in this case, and just colouring exactly where my gel pen dots are so that the overall effect is bright. I've actually coloured a little bit outside of the lines so that you can definitely see the yellow. Once the image was coloured, it was time to fussy cut it. I've left the tiniest bit of footage of real-time cutting, and you can see that I hold my scissors fairly still and mostly move the paper. There's nothing like concentrating really hard on an edge to make you see the little boo-boos that you made along the way. And so I'm also using my white gel pen there to cover up some places where I went outside of the lines. If you hadn't seen me do it, you would never have seen it, even in the close-up photos. Now we get on to choosing a background, and I had originally planned to use those beautiful background dies. They did get used for another card, but you can see that that background is too busy for such a busy subject. No matter how I tried, it was just too busy. Then I thought perhaps I'll go for a grey cardstock, but the greys I had were too warm. They all looked brown. At the time I had some lovely coral pieces of paper too, and I think they would have worked quite well, but they were already earmarked for another project, which perhaps you've seen. I'll put a link to that here too. I made some wedding cake cards with that paper, and so I didn't want to use it, but it did give me the idea that coral would work quite well as a really pale red. And so what I've done is I've grabbed the HUD stencil from Paper Rose Studio, and I'm mixing my own coral colour using some water gems, which are shimmery watercolour paints. I'm mixing those into some glossy gel. You might like to make a little bit more than this, or you'll end up having to scrape it so thin like I did. Once that panel had dried, I cut it out with a stitched rectangle, and I used a larger stitched rectangle to cut the blue paper for the background. I'm going to use a sentiment from the Bright Days Ahead embossed cut-apart sheets, and because it's black on a white cardstock, I'm going around the outside with a black marker to hide the white core of the card. The background I have glued directly to the card, and I've popped my main image up with more pieces of foam tape than you can probably count. I'm using my usual trick of a piece of square paper as a T-ruler so that I can get my sentiment straight, and the card is finished. I'm going to leave you with some close-up photos of the different aspects of the card, including that background. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I look forward to joining you again very soon. Until next time, stay safe, stay crafty, and I'll be back soon. Bye for now.